Jake was scraping gum off a lobby tile when the debt collector told him they might sue his mother. His phone was on speaker on the janitor cart shelf, between the trash bags and the roll of blue paper towels. The woman on the line said the clinic had waited long enough, and her tone made Jake feel smaller than the mop water in his bucket. When the call ended, his supervisor waved a hand toward the basement and asked if he wanted extra hours hauling out the broken vending machines, or if part-time was already too much for him. So that was how Jake ended up in the service corridor under the community college in Columbus, Ohio, facing a dead vending machine with an out-of-order sign curling at the corners. The front glass was spiderwebbed from some old kick, the card reader hanging by its cable. The contractor who owned the machines had emailed that the whole line was being scrapped. Jake had signed a form saying he would empty them, remove anything loose, and leave the frames by the loading dock. He unplugged the machine, rocked it forward, and something inside clunked in a way that was too heavy for a stray soda can. He frowned, opened the lower service panel with the flat key the supervisor had tossed him. Behind a tangle of dust and cables there was a small black rectangle taped to the metal. An external hard drive scratched with a frayed USB cord wrapped around it. He turned it in his hand. It had that faint, oily feel of old plastic, faint sticker shadow where a label used to be. He checked the coin tray for spare change and found only 3 quarters and a Canadian dime. Then slipped the drive into his backpack thinking maybe he could use it for backing up his mom's photos. First small win of the night, he told himself. Back at his studio apartment, on a sagging futon with the traffic hum from Cleveland Avenue coming through the thin window, he plugged the drive into his old laptop. The laptop wheezed. The fan screamed. The drive light blinked and then went dark. For a second, he thought he had killed it along with whatever tiny hope he had nailed to it. He jiggled the connector, refreshed the file explorer, and a new disk finally appeared with a single strange folder name that made his stomach flip before he even clicked it. Wallet backup. Jake was not a tech guy. His job was bleach and floor polish, not code. Still, he typed wallet backup into a search bar and the results filled his screen with the same word again and again. Bitcoin, crypto, private keys, scams, prison sentences for hackers. That was his first real obstacle. He had no idea whether opening that file could dump malware on his machine, or whether keeping it was even legal. The vending machines were not college property. They belonged to some third-party company that had stopped paying rent for the space. Jake dug through old emails on his work account until he found the name. Lakefront Refreshments, LLC. Search results said the company had been dissolved years ago. Phone disconnected, website gone. Mini climax in his mind, one weight off his chest. Then another doubt landed. He remembered the form he had signed in the supervisor office. Everything removable goes to trash. He called the campus facilities desk and asked, trying to sound casual, what to do with small electronics left in the machines. The clerk said if the vendor had abandoned them, the college treated it as junk. They did not have storage. They did not want any more clutter. Toss it if it does not work. So now Jake was sitting on his futon with something that everyone officially called trash, but that the internet kept calling a wallet. He messaged his coworker Marco, who was always talking about crypto on breaks, bragging about $10 here and there. Marco came over with a cheap pizza and looked at the screen. Marco squinted. That is a wallet data file, he said. Old style. From back when people mined coins on home computers. He tapped a few keys, opened a free tool he had on a thumb drive, and tried to read it. The program asked for a passphrase. When they tried an empty one, it flashed an error. Encrypted wallet. Marco sat back and whistled softly. If this thing has nothing, you lost an evening. If it has something, it could be a lot. But we cannot get in without the passphrase. He showed Jake an on-screen history view that did not reveal amounts but showed timestamps from 2010, 2011, long before Jake had even heard the word Bitcoin. The idea that someone had left that in a vending machine shell made his scalp tingle. They spent the next hour arguing over what to do. Turn it in somewhere. Call the police. Ignore it. Each option sounded either stupid or dangerous. When Marco left, he promised to ask a friend who did data recovery. Jake shut the laptop and lay awake listening to the neighbor television through the wall, the word passphrase running laps in his brain. 2 days later, Marco sent a message. My cousin can clone the drive so we do not fry the original. Bring it to his shop on the south side. So on Jake's only free afternoon, he rode the bus past pawn shops and bail bonds offices to a narrow storefront that smelled of solder and cheap cologne. On the counter, the drive looked smaller than Jake remembered. The cousin, a quiet guy named Luis with smudged glasses, set it on an anti-static mat like it was a fragile insect. He plugged it into a dock, tightened the cables, tapped the case with one fingertip to feel the faint vibration as the platters spun up. The sound was a high thin whine under the buzz of the fluorescent light. Luis cloned the contents to a fresh disk, then opened the copy on a clean computer that was not connected to the internet. Step by step, zero glamour. He muttered about sector errors, about bad blocks that he managed to map around. When the familiar wallet file appeared on his screen, he nodded once. Still there, intact. The next layer was the passphrase. Luis explained that guessing randomly would take centuries. You needed hints, so they combed through the rest of the drive. Old text files. A folder of photos from some apartment kitchen in what looked like Buffalo, New York, judging by a fridge magnet from a local radio station. A dump of emails exported from an address that no longer worked. The sender called himself Max. In one text file, half diary and half tech notes, Max had written a line that froze Jake. If I get hit by a bus, the password is my first dog plus the year I mined my first block. No one reads this anyway. Under that line was a list of minor logs from 2010. Jake felt his mouth go dry. They searched the photos for anything that looked like a dog. There he was, in several images, a scruffy golden mutt with a red collar. On one blurry selfie, Max had scribbled in paint program letters. Buddy does not like the fan noise. Luis said that is it. Buddy and a year. He typed combinations, adding numbers, changing capitalization. Each time the program shook its head with a flat little error box. Then Jake noticed another file, short, named Simply Vet. Inside was a scanned bill from a clinic in Tonawanda, listing the patient as Buddy Rossner, with a birth year printed in a tiny font. Luis put that year at the end of the name, hit enter, and this time the error box did not appear. The wallet opened. On screen, a long list of early mine transaction outputs sat untouched for more than a decade. Luis clicked to total them and his eyebrows went up so high Jake thought they might leave his face. Jake did not even try to follow the math. He just saw the final balance in BTC and knew, from all the headlines over the years, that it was more money than he had ever expected to see. He felt both taller and suddenly fragile, like one wrong key press could erase the number forever. Luis moved some of the coins into a new modern wallet under Jake control, carefully, while Jake watched his own shaking hands enter the fresh seed phrase on paper, letter by letter. When they stepped back from the desk, the hard drive sat there like any other used component, and yet the room felt brighter and heavier at the same time. Jake walked out with a folded piece of paper in his pocket that could change everything or burn everything down depending on what came next. The first person outside that shop who heard the real story was an accountant who rented a cramped office above a nail salon. Her website mentioned digital assets and tax reporting, which was all Jake needed to see. He sat in front of her laminated desk, knees bouncing, while she scrolled through the transaction history that Luis had printed. She asked where he had found the drive. He told her about the vending machine, the abandoned company, the dissolved LLC records. She checked the state business registry on her screen and confirmed it. Lakefront Refreshments had no active officers, no forwarding contact, no bankruptcy estate to claim assets. The accountant said the word abandoned property more than once and recommended he also consult a lawyer to cover himself. Mini-climax, the path forward looked real, but also more complicated than he had imagined. The lawyer, a calm man in a second-hand suit, listened even longer. He asked whether Jake had tried to locate Max, the original owner. They had. The old email address bounced. The name on the vet bill did not match any recent listings in that area. A couple of social media profiles had gone dormant around 2014. The lawyer leaned back and said that Jake had made a good faith effort to find the owner, documented everything, and under state law there was a strong argument that the coins, once transferred into his own wallet, were his. The remaining question was tax. So Jake agreed to report the full amount, to treat it like a once-in-a-lifetime windfall, pay the brutal share and still come out ahead by more than he could wrap his head around. He avoided telling most people. Marco knew. Luis knew. His brother guessed something was up the day Jake paid back every borrowed dollar in cash. His brother joked that he must have robbed a bank. Jake only smiled thinly and said it was overtime. Then the first wire hit his checking account after they sold a fraction of the coins through a regulated exchange. The number on the banking app felt unreal. At almost the same moment, the hospital billing office called his mother again about collections. Jake asked them how much would clear every cent of her outstanding debt. The amount they gave him was brutal and at the same time suddenly small compared to what he now controlled. He told the woman on the phone to check her screen in a few minutes and stayed on the line while he authorized the transfer. Bill by bill, the life around Jake changed from patched together to solid. His mother in Cleveland stopped getting letters with red stamps. She cried in the billing office lobby while Jake stood next to the plastic ficus plant, feeling awkward and grateful that no one there knew he had walked in carrying numbers that could buy the building twice over. He did not move to Miami or buy a sports car. What he really wanted was to quit mopping around other people's treadmills at the big chain gym and build something of his own back in his hometown of Marion. There was an empty auto shop just off Main Street, concrete floor, high ceiling, old oil stains like shadows. The building had sat with a for lease sign for so long that the edges had curled. Jake signed the lease, renovated the space with a local contractor, installed squat racks where the hydraulic lifts had been, and painted the walls in simple white and blue. He called it ground floor strength, partly as a joke about where he had started. There was no neon, no influencer wall. Just barbells, chalk, and a small office where he kept a file with every document about the hard drive, the lawyer letters, the tax returns. He hired a couple of trainers from around town, including one guy who used to stock vending machines and shook his head laughing when he saw how careful Jake was with the new snack cooler. Most of the regulars never heard the full story. As far as they knew, Jake was a quiet guy who had cleaned buildings for years and then somehow scraped together enough to open a modest gym. On late nights, when the place was empty and the lights were off except for the tiny glow from the exit sign, he would sit on a bench and think about Max in that old Buffalo kitchen, mining coins on some noisy rig, never imagining his backup drive would end up taped inside a vending machine in Ohio. Jake knew he had been lucky in a way that could not be repeated on purpose. What stayed with him was not just the money but the feeling from that first night in the basement corridor, when trash had turned out to be something else. From then on he treated every small chore, every broken thing a little differently. Not because he expected another hidden fortune, but because he had seen how much of life sat inside objects that everyone else passed by, waiting quietly for the one person who would bother to pick them up and really look.